From a guy that lived in Iran for 10 years, 2 years in Germany at a refugee camp, and I haven't been in America, served the military, gone from being poor to middle income to low income to upper class to, now worth a few hundred, whatever where I'm at this phase of my life at 43. I said, I'm here to tell you America is the greatest country in the world.
Hello, this is Robert Kiyosaki, and welcome to another edition of Rich Dad's World. It's the real world of money, investing, and freedom. I think that's the most important word today is freedom. So anyways, I have a hard time with people trying to take my freedom away. And our guest today is he's really an old friend. I've known him for years, Patrick Bet-David, and years ago, he drove up in this bus in front of the Rich Dad's office in Scottsdale. I said, who is this wild man? And it's been a love affair ever since because, the definition of intelligence is, if you agree with me, you're intelligent. And today we're going to be talking about how you prepare, because I suspect they're going to do their best to take more of our freedoms away. And the question is how do you not allow them to steal your freedoms? I don't care if you're a liberal or conservative, just don't mess with my freedom. That's all I ask. So Patrick, I was at Patrick's birthday party and it blew me away. I mean, his organization is a lot bigger than his bus he showed up in Scottsdale. And the thing I was most impressed with are the people around him. And the people around him are definitely proactive. They're going for it. I would say their financial future is very secure because of not so much about what they're selling, but what they're learning. And when it comes to how your future will do is what skill sets do you have? And that's probably the most important thing. And that was a story of my rich dad and my poor dad. My poor dad always said, go back to school, get your PhD. The trouble was he was broke. And I said, if I get my PhD, I'll just wind up like you. And my rich dad said, when I came back from Vietnam in 1974, he says the number one skill of an entrepreneur is ability to sell. And what I was most impressed with Patrick Bet-David's organization is his guys were confident, men and women, positive, going forward. Their future is very, very bright because they have a great teacher in Patrick Bet-David. So Patrick, welcome to the Rich Dad World program.
It's great to be on with you.
Yeah. So what would you say about a person's skill sets? I mean, what carries you into the future? It's not your college degree, but what skills do you have, right?
Yeah, it's funny you talk about sales, and I'm thinking about this whole thing with sales. When I got out of the military, I knew how to work hard. I didn't have a problem working hard. That was not tough for me. I learned that from the military, just like yourself, having served in the Marines. And my dad was a worker. He ran a 99-cent store in Inglewood, and he's always been a worker. So I got the work part. But the sales side I didn't have. I started working at Bally Total Fitness, and I learned how to sell. I was coached by a guy named Cisco. He was my manager at Bally's. He sent me to Fox Hills Mall because I couldn't sell memberships at the gym. And he says, before you give up sales, I want you to go try to sell memberships at the mall. I said, Cisco, I can't sell memberships at the gym. You want me to sell it at the mall? He said, yes. I went to Fox Hills Mall. First day, I was standing behind the booth. I was so afraid to talk to anybody and engage. And the next thing you know, I came to the side of the booth because it was these two other guys. And I came in front of the booth, and one girl came in, bought the first membership from me, $75 down, $32. And I remember it till today. This was a $99. And I called Cisco. I said, Cisco, somebody bought a contract from me. He says, you got to be kidding. I said, no. So then I sold second, third, fourth, and I became rookie of the month. I became rookie of the quarter. Then I became rookie of the year. And then I saw the world from a completely different perspective once you learn how to sell, because it's almost a skill set of freedom. Whether if you ever see the hot girl in town who dates a guy that's maybe a 5 or a 6 and she's an 8 or a 9, and you're wondering, how the hell does she end up with them? There's a very high likelihood the guy's a great salesperson, okay? If you ever get passed up by somebody on a promotion and that person's not as qualified as you to get the promotion, but they get it, they probably sold themselves better for that position than you did. Right. If you ever notice in a family setting where, the time comes where somebody has to make a decision for the family's future and your idea is better than another person's idea, the other person was better at selling their idea than you. This whole sales thing goes in many different ways. And today, I wrote a list of things while you were talking here about skill set. My kids, when they come up to me, they want to ask me for something. I said, Dad, I want to go to movies. I want to go to a restaurant. I said, sell me why, not tell me why, sell me why. And they'll say, well, I think we got to go there because, I said, tell me why. And then, well, because of this, because of that. And many times they'll come and they'll say, Dad, we want to go to, in the ocean this week with the boat. I'm like, let's negotiate a deal. Tell me why you deserve to go there. Well, do you remember last week when you asked to do this? We did this. Do you remember last week? And what if we do this? And what if we do this? So I think the skill set of selling, negotiation, reading people, intuition is probably some of the most important skill sets, because you are right. I think they are going to try to impose their power and force to take away more freedom if you allow it to. But if the right people stay a little paranoid and they read them a little bit better, and you have some intuition to know that nothing's more important than your freedom, if we fight back, I don't think they'll be successful.
That's correct. And then the saying we have at Rich Dad, it's sales equals income. And so I meet so many people who say, well, I can't afford this, I can't afford that. I can't afford to buy real estate. I can't afford to buy Bitcoin. I can't afford to buy. Well, the reason you can't afford to buy something is because you can't sell. And sales equals income. So back in 1974, my dad wanted me to go to the University of Hawaii and get my PhD. And I said, no, he wanted to fly for the airlines because he was a pilot. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to learn how to sell. And he was upset. He said, salesmen are crooks, they're con artists. It's not a very honorable profession. But that's why he was poor. So many PhD types, academic types, they think they're above the capitalist process. They think their PhD entitles them to the better life. But if you go for your PhD, you really don't have the skill sets to be in the capitalist world. Like when my father, bless his heart, he ran for lieutenant governor against his boss, the governor, as a Republican in the People's Republic of Hawaii. Hawaii's 100% communist. And so he ran as a Republican and he lost. And the governor said to him, you'll never work in this state again. So the power the governor had over my dad was his job. And the hardest thing for a school teacher, Patrick, is as a capitalist, you really don't need a school teacher. You need a salesman. And my father just couldn't sell. He wouldn't, he just kept holding up his PhD. I have a PhD, but he couldn't sell.
Wow.
And you know what I mean? And I saw that. And that's when my rich dad, who had no education at all, said, you better learn how to sell pretty quickly. So I was at your birthday party and I saw your team, both men and women, what they have is confidence. And that confidence, ability to sell, to communicate and all that, that'll carry them into the future. And what's going to happen is as the economy worsens and these cuts keep stealing our freedoms, they're going to have the income via which you take advantage of real estate, of whatever Bitcoin, whatever they want to invest in. But if you can't sell, remember, sales equals income. And if you can't sell, you don't have income. Is that direct a process? But when I sat down with my poor dad, he just couldn't hear it. He said, salesmen are crooks. They deceive people, they cheat people and all this. But that's what prevented him from getting ahead. Have you seen people like that?
Oh, tremendous. I mean, my dad, I mean, he was a worker, but, he was always stuck with where he was at. My family with where they were at. But, the biggest thing listening to the story of your father is your dad wasn't afraid to go up. So maybe he wasn't a good salesman. Maybe he wasn't a entrepreneur, but the guy definitely had courage to go up against his former boss as a governor. And that courage was definitely passed down to his son with the courage you got to do what you do in the books you write and the buttons you push and the predictions you make and the controversy and the opposition you face. You piss a lot of people off with some of the things that you talk about, but you're comfortable doing that because you got the You got the right genes there. No, I will say a couple of things to you. I think the one word I think about is, how can a person be irreplaceable, right? That's how you increase your market value if you are irreplaceable. So how do we become irreplaceable? To me, if a person's a W-2 person, let's pick a engineer, a coder, okay? And a person produces the software for you. They're so good of a coder that they've had so many years of building that code for you, the software for you. They are somewhat irreplaceable, where you kind of need them. Like, listen, here's what I've done for you. I've developed software for you that's made you $15 million. I think I deserve a raise. I think I need to be at 285. I think I need to be at 140, 120, whatever the position of this person is. You're irreplaceable, right? So somebody may be watching the same path. I'm not somebody that went to school to be an engineer. I can't be a coder. That's not me. Great. You may be watching this and saying, well, what other way can I be irreplaceable? Well, if you learn how to make your own money without somebody paying you that money like a job, if you learn how to make your own money independently, if you don't rely on the government to support you, if you don't rely on your parents to support you or anybody to support you, independently make your own money, you're essentially irreplaceable. So the more irreplaceable people that we have that are not leaning and relying on an organization, institution, or the government to take care of them, taxes goes lower. There's a lot of things going on today, but my biggest thing would be, whoever I am that's listening to this, whatever country you're living in, we're seeing a lot of this stuff taking place all over the world. Number one thing you got to do to be irreplaceable and have a lot of backing when you speak and have a lot of weight is, one, go make your millions, okay? Two, make the investments to be protected financially yourself, your family. You don't have to worry about what somebody else is going to do to you. If you accept a job or career or whatever you're doing it because you're choosing to do it, not because you're forced to do it. You choose to put yourself in that kind of a situation. And if you do that, a government and an institution fears somebody like you because you don't need them. There's always this notion about when moms and sons or father and sons, kids, sometimes they go through this challenge because the kid's growing up always needing mommy and daddy for money, always needing mommy and daddy for money, mommy and daddy for money, mommy and daddy for money. Then there's this awkward transition where mommy and daddy can threaten to take stuff away from the kid by saying, if you don't do this, I'm not going to give you an allowance. And eventually the kid says, listen, I make my own money now, $20,000. That threat doesn't work anymore. And parents sometimes is uncomfortable to give up that control. They lose it, right? So the government doesn't like it when you no longer need them. The government doesn't like it when you no longer need their welfare state or their support or any of that, because you independently make money. If you don't position yourself in a way to make your own money and be free, you are going to be living a life of conformity and being a hostage. That is not a situation. We were not created to be held hostage by another organization because we desperately need them. We are created. We were created to be creative and solve many different problems. Unfortunately, you cannot do that when you're relying on the government. How do you solve that? By exactly what Robert's talking about, which is sales.
And so when I was a kid, I couldn't listen to my poor dad anymore because I was really horrible in school anyway. And they kept saying, well, if you don't get good grades, you won't get a good job. I said, good, I'm on the right track. And then, so I would play Monopoly with my rich dad, but I had to work for him for free. That was the deal. And he says, if I pay you money, you think like an employee. So I would work for him for free, and then he'd play Monopoly and teach me. So as I got older, when I was about 12 years old, he says, okay, your graduate course is this. I had to go to he had a lot of rental units. He called them rental units. My poor dad, the school teacher, called them slums, And I think, the formula, Patrick, is the real estate buys the land. So rich dad was putting up these military Quonset huts on this really great land, but the Quonset huts, the military were buying the land. So he put these little cheap ass Quonset huts up there. And my poor dad went nuts. He went, oh, how dare you do that? He's taking advantage of all these people. He's a complete Marxist socialist. So when I was about 12, rich dad says, okay, we played enough Monopoly. You're going to graduate. So the next graduation course was I had to go knock on doors and collect rent. I tell you, Patrick, I learned more about life knocking on doors,
Wow.
collecting rent, because everybody who was late in their payments had an excuse. They all had a TV set. I could hear it going in the background. They weren't working, and they didn't pay their rent. It was one of the best educations I ever had.
I can only imagine.
Oh my God, at 12 years old.
Wow.
And so that kind of, that also twisted my path,
Hmm.
because my poor dad had excuses too, if you know what I mean. I heard similar excuses collecting rent from these very, very poor people. And I heard the same excuses at home. And so that's why when Rich Dad said to me, when I came back from the Marine Corps, he says, you better learn how to sell. I didn't want to do it because nobody likes rejection. Everybody hates rejection. I'll tell you two stories. Is that when I was in Sunday school, I was about 7. And my Sunday school teacher asked me, she says, why were the 3 wise men wise? And I said, well, because they were rich. And she goes, no. Why were the 3 wise men wise? I said, because they were rich. And she kept saying, well, why do you say they were rich? I said, well, they had frankincense, gold, and myrrh. And they came to give it to them. I'm not pushing religion here, but I went to a Christian school, Sunday school. So they had frankincense, gold, and myrrh. And she said, they were rich. She says, no, that's not the answer I'm looking for.
Are you worried about your financial security in these unprecedented times? If you are, the next minute could profoundly impact your financial security. Imagine waking up to find the economy has plunged and your portfolio has plummeted 30 to 45%, while banks are in turmoil, holding your money hostage while waiting for FDIC intervention. Where would you turn? For many, this may sound like fiction, but it's a stark reality for those that have money on the line. Recently, America's awoke to both the NASDAQ and the Dow, plummeting over 1,100 points each and triggering a frenzy of sell-offs. History shows us how a single event can crash the market, like the dot-com bubble of 1999, the subprime mortgage crisis of 2008, and the pandemic of 2020. But today, we're facing multiple bubbles: commercial real estate, stock, bonds, and banks. Combined with the relentless inflation, the threat of global recession, the specters of war, and you have the perfect storm. The consequences could be catastrophic, plunging us into unprecedented crisis. America is sliding in the age of discord, with trust in institutions collapsing and the democratic norms unraveling. The quality of life for Americans has declined. Wealth is concentrated among the rich, while the median American family income stagnates, creating a dangerously top-heavy social pyramid. Moreover, hostile countries like Russia, China, and Iran are working to destroy the U.S. dollar. Gold is a no-matter-what store of wealth that you need. That's why Robert has been such an advocate of gold, and he trusts Allegiance Gold. Allegiance Gold is ready to help you incorporate physical gold as part of your portfolio and protect it against economic uncertainty. Visit protectwithrobert.com today to learn how you can qualify for up to $5,000 in free silver with a qualifying investment. Or give them a call at 844-3-ROBERT. Remember to mention Robert and Kim sent you when you contact Allegiance Gold. Secure your IRA or 401k today with Allegiance Gold. Visit protectwithrobert.com or call 844-3-ROBERT.
Here's this young Sunday school teacher. She says, the reason they were rich is they always sought the best teachers. And I went, holy mackerel. So Patrick, about 2 years later, when I realized I'm not learning jack from my school teachers, and I go to a really rich kid's school, and I go, how come they're rich and I'm poor? My old man's a head of education, PhD, and I'm still poor. And I realized I had bad teachers. So what happened then is that my poor dad was a pretty good guy. He says, you should listen to your best friend's father, who was Rich Dad. I said, why listen to him? I said, because he's an entrepreneur. And I said, what are you? He says, My dad says, poor dad says, I'm an employee. And I go, what's the difference? He says, it's a big difference. He says, entrepreneurs must know about money. Employees don't. There was like a big, big lesson. So the next lesson was this. So I got this job at Xerox. The same story you have is I get my little handy dandy sales planner out. I'm dying. Let's say there's 20 sales guys at the Xerox branch in Honolulu. I'm dying. I mean, I'm like, and this guy Sanchez flies in from Western Region, Santa Ana. He looks at my sales thing, and I got all these appointments, but no sales. And I'm going to get fired. So I said, I can't. I'm working hard, but I'm going to get fired. Because I had no sales. So I go. My rich dad's office was at Waikiki, so I go to rich dad's office and I show him my planner. He looks at it. He goes, "Okay." He says, "Let me ask you this: how many?" And I had to knock on doors. I had no established accounts. The FNGs and the FNU guy has to always cold call. That's as brutal as it comes. So I'm cold calling in Honolulu. I'm getting nowhere, but I'm making a lot of cold calls. So I show my rich dad my sales planner, just like you do with your guys. And I said, my rich dad says, well, it's obviously why you're failing. I said, why is that? He says, you're not failing enough. He says, if you want to become successful, you have to step up your failure rate. I went, what? Because in my poor dad's family, the academics family, PhDs and all this, failure means you're not successful. And to my rich dad, failure meant you were getting successful. So his advice to me, and I'm working for Xerox, I'm probably 28 years old. He goes, you got to step up your failure rate. Find a way to fail faster. So that's when you get creative. I can only make so many sales calls a day. So what I would do at night, let's say I left downtown Honolulu at 5, I would go to this nonprofit organization up the street and I would dial for dollars. So I could make 30 sales calls in a night. And I didn't care if I failed or, I was just dialing to get people to donate money for this charity. And I failed 30 times a night. And I kept failing 30 times. That was my goal. Fail 30 times a night. But you know what happened, Patrick? My sales at Xerox went up. It was the most amazing thing, because after a while, look at what I saw at your birthday party in Miami. Your people, men and women, have tremendous confidence. And when I meet somebody who's poor and struggling and all this, they lack that confidence. They're more afraid of what somebody thinks of them than they think of themselves. So that was the first thing I noticed. So, congratulations on being a great sales trainer, developing sales leaders. But for me to become successful, I had to step up my failure rate, which goes against everything school teachers teach you. So today, the reason I have so much money is because, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is now 25 years old, is still number 20 in the world. And the academics still say, you still can't write. And I go, yeah, but I can sell. It's a bestseller. But these academic types, they say, but you can't spell. I said, I know, but I can sell.
Yeah.
It's a whole different value system. And it was turned down by everybody. But one of the biggest advantages I had is that when I wrote the book, I endorsed network marketing. Because in network marketing, if you have a good sales leader, you will learn the number one skill of an entrepreneur's ability to sell. So, I have very similar mindsets, different experience, same experiences. But if I could leave a message throughout, the reason I can buy so much real estate is because I make so much money. And if I don't invest in the real estate, I pay taxes. But most people can't invest in real estate because they don't have any money. Do you know what I mean? They can buy a duplex or something like this. But I'm $1 billion in debt. I borrowed $1 billion to buy all this real estate. And the only reason I can do that is because I know how to sell. And it's a completely opposite world of the average person out there. And by the way, Patrick Bet-David this is the book you're part of here, Patrick. This is called The Capitalist Manifesto. You're a part of it
I love it.
because you ran away from charity, didn't you?
10
Would you mind
years.
talking about that? What you
Yeah, absolutely. 10 years in Iran. I lived there when the whole war happened between Iran and Iraq. And I was born to a communist mother and a capitalist imperialist father. One side of my family would always talk about the fact that rich people are greedy, and the other side of the family would talk about that poor people are lazy. And both of them were both right and wrong. You know, there's greedy rich people and there is greedy poor people. And I know a lot of lazy poor people, and I also know hardworking poor people who have the wrong mindset. So anyways, we escaped. I lived in Germany for 2 years at a refugee camp, which I got the first taste of entrepreneurship there. A Super Nintendo, Super Mario Brothers 2 was coming out. And there was a guy in the refugee camp. His name was Jan Staff. He's no longer here with us. He had a sister who was gorgeous, and I was in love with this girl. And I was 11 years old. I'm like, I got to figure out a way to spend more time with this girl. So I talked to the Jan. Jan was 4 years older than me, and I realized Jan liked video games. And so I said, if I buy Super Nintendo, he can play Super Nintendo and I can play with his sister. This is a great deal. I was 11 or 12 at the time. She was 10 or 11. We were both kids, clueless. So I went to the local swimming pool, and Germans like to drink and they like to party. And it was the year when they won the World Cup. So I went to the local swimming pool and I said, look, you got beer bottles and beer, cans everywhere here. What if I bring this up to you and I clean it up? I talked to the owner. He said, I'll give you 5 pfennig per. I cleaned house with his pool every day. Eventually, I gathered 250 marks, which is what it cost for me to buy that Super Nintendo. I went to Kaufhof, which Kaufhof is like our Sears. And I went to Kaufhof and I bought the Super Mario Brothers, Super Nintendo. I brought it back to the refugee camp. I was a hero. Everybody was playing with the video games. And I asked Katarina, let's go spend some time together. And we go to the park. That was my first experience about entrepreneurship, that you can make the money out there. Money's out there. There's many ways to make the money. You got to go ask and create some kind of value for you to make it. Then came to the States at 12 years old, Glendale, California, and was there for 6 years, then went to the Army. Then a day before 9/11, I started working at Morgan Stanley Dean Witter as a stockbroker. Got my Series 7, 66, 31, 26 as a 21-year-old. I was the youngest broker they hired. And then I went to Transamerica for 7.5 years, and I started my own insurance company. And the rest is history. But it just validates that, how often, like the other day, we're doing research today on politics, and we were watching a lot of old JFK interviews. And I want to read something to you that JFK said in regards to taxes. So, most people think about taxes and like, well, we got to tax the rich. We got to tax the rich. We got to tax the rich. It's not fair, the fact that they don't pay enough taxes. Here's what Kennedy once said. On September 18th, 1963, Kennedy said, a tax cut means higher family income and higher business profits and a balanced federal budget. A tax cut means a balanced federal budget, said by a Democratic president. Every taxpayer and his family will have more money left over after taxes for a new car, a new home, new conveniences, education, investment. Every businessman can keep a higher percentage of his profits in his cash register or put it to work expanding or improving his business. And as the national income grows, the federal government will ultimately end up with more revenues, said JFK. How weird is that a JFK would today potentially be considered a Republican or a libertarian, but he understood business? Because when it comes down to business, I was a kid. Robert, my mom, I was 13 years old, 14 years old, going to Glendale High School. My economics teacher, my history teacher starts talking about Democrats, Republicans, independents. I don't know anything about politics. I come home and I ask my mom, I said, Mom, are we Republicans or are we Democrats? And my mom says, we're Democrats. I said, okay, cool. I said, can you tell me why we're Democrats? She says, because the Democrats are for the poor and Republicans are for the rich. I said, huh. I said, you know what, Mom? She says, what? I said, when I grow up, I want to be a Republican. She said, what do you mean? I said, I hate being rich. I hate being poor. It sucks being poor. I didn't know what Republican meant. What I try to say is, I don't want lunch ticket. I hate welfare checks. I don't want to feel like I'm weak and I'm holding a conference call yesterday. One of my guys started talking about the fact that my sales guys don't listen to me. They're not working that hard. What do I do about this? And he's got this voice about himself. I said, stop sounding helpless. You are not helpless. Why do you sound helpless? If you're helpless, the world identifies you as being helpless. I said, can you talk? Yes. Do you speak more than one language? Yes. Can you hear me? Yes. Can you see me? Yes. If you touch me, will you feel me? Yes. Can you taste food? Yes. Can you hear music? Yes. You're so gifted. You don't need to feel helpless. This helpless mentality is so unattractive. Nobody likes a helpless mentality. So half the battle is, for folks that sometimes are coming from other countries and we're immigrants, your family, my family, when you come to a country like this, I was speaking at a school last week and one of the guys got up on stage and he felt like guilty talking about America's the greatest country in the world. He says, look, we're not perfect, but we are one of the best countries in the world. And I'm like, how do I say something without stepping on this guy because he's the headmaster? So I get up on stage, I say, well, first of all, let me applaud the headmaster. Fantastic message. Thank you for your service. But, from a guy that lived in Iran for 10 years, 2 years in Germany at a refugee camp, and I haven't been in America, served the military, gone from being poor to middle income to low income to upper class to, now worth a few hundred, whatever where I'm at this phase of my life at 43. I said, I'm here to tell you America is the greatest country in the world. Not one of the greatest, not a top 10 greatest, not top 5. It is the greatest country in the world. And one guy says, how do you measure the greatest country in the world? I said, it's very simple for me. He said, well, how do you do it? I said, well, here's a question for you. He says, what's that? I said, before I give you my measurement, you tell me how you measure. Well, I think it's based on happiness. How do you measure happiness? You want to be happy? Go on an island, go to Belize. You'll be happy. Does that mean Belize is the best country in the world? Well, no, I guess the best country in the world is the fact that the country is very transparent. Okay, let's just say you're my country. We're broke. We have nothing. We have a weak military. And I transparently tell you we're broke. We have no military, no business. Everyone's dying, but I'm transparent. Does that mean it's the greatest country in the world? Well, I guess it's not. So how do you judge a great country? So we're going back and forth, back and forth. Finally, I said, let me change it for you and ask you a question. They said, what's that? I said, how do you judge a great restaurant? She says, reviews? I said, okay, that's one way. I said, well, let me ask you this. It's 12 o'clock lunchtime, weekday. You go to a restaurant, okay? Say 4 of us go to a restaurant, and at 12:15, you're sitting there for 15 minutes. The place has got 40 tables. You're the only table there, lunchtime, busy. All the other restaurants around you are busy, but this one's not. What do you do 15 minutes into? You're like, guys, we're probably at a bad restaurant. Let's get up and walk out. You leave, right? He says, yes. I said, now, what do you do when you go to a restaurant and you walk in, there's a 20-minute wait, there's 200 people inside, and any day you go during lunchtime is packed. What do you say about that restaurant? That's a great restaurant. I said, that great restaurant is America, because America leads the world in immigration, and it's not even close. We have 48 million, and the number 2 country only has 10 million. If that was a football score, it'd be 48-10. That's a shellacking is what it is, what America is doing, because the list of people, the line is so long. Millions on top of millions want to come to America. So, and I know this is an international thing. There's people from all around the world. By the way, I will tell you a couple of different things. One, you got to have pride in the country you represent. You got to have pride in the religion you represent. You got to have pride in the heritage that you represent. But you also have to understand that the basic fundamentals of freedom apply everywhere. This is why Gorbachev finally brought the wall down. This is why China finally realized they need capitalism. So capitalism works no matter where you are, as long as you leave the freedom upon the people to make a decision for themselves on what kind of a life they want to live. So I don't know if that's what you were looking at, but that's briefly my story.
And that's exactly the story. I mean, you and I are like I said, the definition of intelligence is, if you agree with me, you're intelligent. And so I want to thank you, because when I met Kim, she turned me down for 6 months. And if not for sales training, I would never, I just persisted 6 months. And then when I stepped up the interest in her, I found out she had a great job with an advertising agency in Honolulu. And every guy wanted her. So, I played rugby, and my rugby player said, she'll never go out with you. You're so freaking ugly. And, how friends are. And then one day I found out that she would work in Honolulu. And then in the evening, she had a network marketing business. And she would go and set up her little thing. to learn how to sell. And I went, man, this is a woman after my own heart. You know, she's good looking, she's got beauty, she's got brains, and she likes business. And then, the reason I'm here is because I have a great woman. If you have somebody who doesn't like business because you think it's illegal, immoral, unethical, and all that, you pay the price. That's like the price when I was 12 years old, knocking on doors, collecting rent from poor people. They all had excuses. And you and I know that's the biggest death of all, is when you let your excuses run your life. But I'll show you what capitalism really is. This is, if you ever seen the financial statement here, you have income, expense, asset, liability, and employees and self-employed focus here. And then B's and I's, or entrepreneurs like Patrick and myself, focus here. This is called the balance sheet. This is called the income statement. But the big problem here is this word here, tax. And Patrick talked about how taxes wipe you out. So what I had to learn was I had to learn to build a business here by selling, learn how to sell. So what happened is my income goes up here. So as my income goes up here, taxes just take it right away. So I had to find out how I could minimize my taxes legally and increase my income. And the way I do that is as an investor. So what happens for me is, let's say I make $1 million here. Okay, $1 million. If I do nothing, the government takes 60% of that. So I net 400,000 on $1 million. But the reason I had to learn how to invest in real estate was because I come down to the liability column here and I borrow 4 million. So I make $1 million there. And as an investor, which Richard's World recommends, is you learn how to acquire real estate. So if I borrow $4 million here, I step up my asset value to 5 million. And because I've stepped up my basis from 1 million plus debt to 4 million, I have a basis of 5 million. I pay no tax. If you understand that, that's why we teach real estate investing and stock investing and things like that. But of all the asset classes, it's real estate, because real estate runs on tax, on debt, and the more debt you use, the less tax you pay. Because if people like myself and people who borrow money, if we don't borrow money, money doesn't come into existence. The only way money exists is after 1971, when Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, the US dollar became debt. So the only way money could be created was for people like me to borrow money. So Ken McElroy and I borrowed $31 million to buy a piece of property in Austin, Texas. So we stepped it up by $31 million. We stepped it up over here to $50 million. And because we have a $50 million asset, the tax laws allow us to pay no taxes, and this income flows into me tax-free. That's capitalism. But they'll never teach you that. So what schools teach you is to be E's and S's, to be employees or specialists like a doctor or a lawyer or a real estate agent. But this is what my rich dad taught me, and that's what Patrick Bet-David teaches his guys. So this is real capitalism. And the reason we have Rich Dad's World is so you can learn to do this. Before we came on the air, Patrick and I were talking about one of those nefarious people who's on YouTube all the time. And there's a lot of fakes on YouTube, as you guys know. And this guy was saying the way you invest in real estate is you go out and you start with a 200-unit apartment house for 40 million bucks. Are you nuts? You know, if you buy a $40 million apartment house and you make a mistake, you bought the Titanic. You're going to go down with it. Without real financial education, without coaching, without really good guides like Patrick and I had, the US is now a nation of renters. And everybody's going to rent because they can't afford a house. So it's good news. So that's why Rich Dad World exists, to assist you in understanding how you take $1 million, you borrow $4 million here, you come across here, make income here, and you wipe out your taxes legally. That's what Capitalism Manifesto is about. That's what Rich Dad's about. But I strongly recommend you choose your teachers wisely. This guy he's very popular real estate guy. I wouldn't trust him. I mean, I do not trust him. He says, yeah, just go out and buy a 200 unit. You start big. You got to be crazy. So for those of you who want to do this here, make $1 million, learn how to sell. $1 million comes down here. I borrow 4, step up my basis to 5, and wipes out my taxes, and I make money tax-free. That's the way it's played. Okay, so thank you for listening to Rich Dad's World, and please invest in your financial education. But as Patrick and I were talking about, you've really got to choose your teachers wisely. So, hey, Patrick, I want to thank you. I thank you for supporting my new book, Capitalist Manifesto. But you're a great teacher, and I appreciate what you do. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate you.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.